Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
So in a nutshell, when I say it's end-to-end, it really is, because it involves different approaches from the cloud on how you provision, monitor, deploy, and secure this infrastructure all the way to the edge. And then it propagates itself all the way down. So think of it as an architecture that blends the cloud into the edge almost seamlessly.
As the technology of IoT evolves, the concept of a distributed computing environment is becoming increasingly relevant. A key component of this architecture is fog computing, blending the cloud to the edge. Being able to access computing, networking, and storage resources locally makes sense for many classes of IoT deployments. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, I speak with the bigwigs of the newly formed OpenFog Consortium.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is for business leaders and managers employing the Internet of Things for their business or the business of their customers. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair, and I interview the industry's leading authorities to find out how they use IoT to improve business and create value. If you like this show, subscribe to it on iTunes and go to iotinc.com to check out my complimentary articles, videos, meetups, and webinars.
If you're listening to this podcast before May 2016, then you may be interested in attending one of my one-day workshops. I'll be holding one in New York City on May 2nd and the other at Internet of Things World in Santa Clara on May 9th. For more information, just go to www.iotinc.com/training. And there's a motherlode of exclusive videos, presentation decks, meetup recordings, and special reports, and soon PDF transcriptions of all my podcasts and videos in what I'm calling Bruce's Private Reserve. To get all those goodies, sign up at my website, www.iot-inc.com, using the long version of the registration form. With me today on the IoT Business Show is Helder Antunes, chairman of the OpenFog Consortium, Jeff Fedders, its president, and Lynn Canavan, its executive director. The OpenFog Consortium is creating a reference architecture for fog computing, defining how to distribute compute, network, storage, control, and resources between the cloud and the things, resulting in interoperability for IoT. I know Lynn and Jeff through their work at the IIC, and when I saw they're involved in newly launched OpenFog, I wanted to get them on the show. Helder, Jeff, Lynn, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So what's the big news at OpenFog this week?
This week, let's see, we've added a couple of members, some new academic members. Our first member from Taiwan joined us as well. So we're going and growing, and lots of work in progress, continuing the work of the working groups, and continuing to flesh out the architectural work that's in process. So no big news, just a continuation of the work in process.
Now I noticed that. First of all, I noticed Princeton was one of the founding members, and I want to ask you about that because you just sort of reminded me. But who are the founding members of OpenFog, and why was it started?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. So to your question about Princeton, so the discussion actually started about 18 months ago between Cisco and Princeton. So Professor Meng Cheng of Princeton is a good friend, and the idea about launching a consortium actually grew out of a discussion when I visited Princeton about 18 months ago. Founding members then quickly grew beyond Cisco and Princeton to include Intel, Microsoft, Dell, and ARM. So in essence, these are the 6 founding members.
Now, it's interesting, the academic angle. Tell me about it a little bit more, Helder.
We wanted a very diverse approach to this consortium, so certainly having an academic angle was part of that. You also will see as the consortium grows, we're trying to attract not only technology suppliers, but also consumers of the technology. So we hope to bring in service providers, car companies, and whatnot. But certainly we felt the academic angle was an important one to spur innovation. And we also want to expand that a bit more to also work with organizations like NSF, CERN, and others around the world. Mm-hmm. Really think from an innovation perspective, having as diverse an environment, as diverse group of members is the way to go.
Okay. Well, why don't you guys tell me a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds in IoT? Lynn, why don't you go first?
Well, sure. Well, I think probably like a lot of people out there, I think I was involved with IoT before it was actually called IoT. I was working at IBM, and in about 2010, I was in the Global Alliances group, and we started working with some non-traditional partners, and Schneider Electric, Siemens, and Johnson Controls. Around something that we called a smarter building. And a smarter building essentially was taking, connecting devices, gathering the data, and loading them to off-premise computers so that we could enhance the optimize and do some analysis and adjust these devices for better performance. And so really that's a lot of what we see as IoT now is some of that work that was started by lots of companies way back then. From there, I joined the Industrial Internet Consortium in 2013, which was a couple of months before we actually launched it. And there I was in charge of the programs, the membership, and the marketing, and I ran it until late last year. So very familiar with IoT, and it continues to evolve and grow. It's really an exciting space.
Jeff, what about yourself?
Yes, I have spent a long time working in the areas around transformation, and my background includes early work in what we called the data center transformation, and this was all about virtualization and defining software-defined functions within the data center, which then became the concept of cloud and really changed the business aspects around data center and web services and the transformation into what we now know as cloud businesses. And then after that, I started working on the transformation around networks and did a lot of the early work around software-defined networking and also started the conversation around network function virtualization. And as I started to finish that early work in software-defined networks, I started getting interested in IoT about 3 years ago and decided to start working on IoT transformation. And part of that IoT transformation is taking the conversation from the early thoughts around RFID and to what we know as IoT now, connecting devices and sensors to back-end clouds. That's the early phases of IoT, but in order to really transform IoT in the future, we see from Intel this ability to drive intelligence into the endpoints, and these endpoints then become very much like a cloud environment, and this is why we started getting interested in Fog. Is we think all of the aspects from the technology perspective and also the business model aspects of what's as we know cloud now can be applied to endpoints and the networking and the infrastructure around those endpoints. And this is how we're trying to define Fog, and I'm very excited to start working on this because this is what we consider the missing pieces of really transforming IoT into real money, into real businesses.
Great. Helder, how about yourself?
So I've been around a long time here in the Valley, quite a few interesting startups before joining Cisco about 18 years ago, where I led the embedding of network security protocols into our routers and switches. And then subsequently was one of the early founders of all things IoT inside of Cisco, including the steering committee we put together to launch the IoT World Forum. My first exposure to this was in transportation. I actually seeded the Cisco Connected Car program So that was, and then this rolled into what is now the IoT Business Group. Before I moved into corporate strategy. So I'm very familiar, and to Lynn's point, even prior to that, was very familiar with PLC and the various control systems that existed pre-IP. So like Jeff mentioned, from a technology perspective, this is actually a very exciting time. And if we look at what has happened in IoT, IoE, and let's say the lack of scalability, I think is really due to a few missing pieces, which we obviously think fog will play a major role, because if you look at a lot of these applications today, whether it's in smart cities or oil rigs or in transportation, I actually like to point to a car as a very interesting instantiation of when you look at the amount of computing power, the amount of storage, and now the various radios that cars come with to negotiate whether it's for a consumer or vehicle infrastructure, you can see how the car is evolving as a fog node. But in a nutshell, I think this is an exciting time. And again, back to your earlier question, is one of the reasons why we really want an approach to this to be as diverse as possible, because this is very horizontal in nature. Whereas, for instance, Industrial Internet Consortium is very vertical centric. And so from that perspective, we have a lot to do and accomplish, but we see the same requirements and the same basic technology building blocks as being required and necessary across the board.
All right. Well, I want to start with basics, and let's first define what fog is. I mean, I've heard edge, and I've heard a little bit of cloud. So, Jeff, why don't you take the first stab at what is the definition of fog?
Fog is a set of technologies, and from an Intel perspective, and I think you're going to hear it described differently from the different types of companies that we have as founders. So I think every company that's part of this founding organization will have a unique perspective to this. So from an Intel's perspective, fog is a set of technologies that increase the ability for networking, storage, and compute capabilities at the end of the IoT edge or at the end of the network edge. And there's really two landing zones for fog. One is at the connectivity point where the IoT sensors and actuators happen, but also at the edge of where the network is. And some of the aspects of OpenFog will touch on things like net neutrality and bringing some of the over-the-top services into play here, where we think of the technologies that can support all of the goodness of cloud right at that very edge, like, for example, a car that Elder talked about. But it also applies to things like robots. It applies to autonomous machines. It applies to industrial innovation. It applies to even beyond what we think about IoT. So from our perspective, IoT is one vertical of what we're trying to drive, but it's much more horizontal in its capability than just IoT. We think it applies to other verticals like finance and business and many types of applications where cloud has become predominant in types of business models and services.
Okay. Well, Helder, listen to this description, and you kind of tell me what you think. So the way I think about fog is it's going from the backhaul, so where the IT connects up to the backhaul, IT then going to OT, and then OT going to the edge. So basically from the edge, and the edge being, like Jeff was saying, actuators or sensors. So I think of it as sensors to backhaul. Is that how OpenFog thinks about it, or is it different?
So I think that's part of it, but I would broaden it a bit more. So I would look at it as a comprehensive end-to-end architecture, right? So from that perspective, it's a
end to which end, though?
So from the cloud all the way to the sensor.
Okay. So including the backhaul, then
correct. And the reason is simple. I'll give you a real example. We're working currently with the city of Barcelona on a very interesting fog architecture to help solve some of their problems. As you know today, there are a lot of interesting applications, but they're all siloed, right? So if you look at ITS, if you look at Wi-Fi for people, if you look at parking sensors, if you look at weather monitoring, these are all siloed applications that require multiple infrastructures, therefore multiple centralized management capabilities, separate analytics. And so fast forward and think of a end-to-end architecture, a fog architecture that allows you to aggregate this into a single platform. And therefore, you're then able to have multi-tenancy and in essence have the ability to provision, secure, orchestrate, and deploy multiple applications on a single platform. And this is why I say this is clearly end-to-end, and it involves what you call backhaul, or what some people might call cloud-centric centralized management and deployment capabilities. So it's very comprehensive. As an example, with this Barcelona use case, we're developing different tools to provision, secure, and manage this infrastructure, and then we're providing the ability for inter-application analytics and things that basically allow us to do data mining in ways that have not been able to be achieved before. If you look at the current model of edge to cloud, first of all, it's predicated on a very stable and somewhat fat pipe between the edge devices and the cloud, which we know doesn't always exist for different reasons. And where fog comes in is you actually push some of the computational and the storage capabilities closer to the edge so that you can have some level of local autonomy to process a lot of these things. So in some cases, all you're pushing initially to the cloud are anomalies or user-defined data parameters. And then the ability to exchange this data between applications or between fog nodes before you actually feed this back up to the cloud, again, is one of the capabilities that without a fog-like architecture, you just cannot achieve today. So in a nutshell, when I say it's end-to-end, it really is, because it involves different approaches from the cloud on how you provision, monitor, deploy, and secure this infrastructure all the way to the edge, and then it propagates itself all the way down. So think of it as an architecture that blends the cloud into the edge almost seamlessly.
Okay, no, I'm all over that, the blending the cloud to the edge. But I want to delineate it, so I'm getting a little bit confused. Does the fog include the cloud or not include the cloud?
It absolutely includes the cloud.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's new information to me. Jeff, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And the way we're defining this is a platform, and I like the terminology that Elder talked about. We see fog as a service, as another component to the entire cloud architecture stack, just like infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Fog as a service will also provide the ability to go beyond the brick walls of the cloud, the data center, and move it through the network and all the way to the end, and actually virtualize. If you could start to detach the idea of sensors and actuators as an entity, but rather as a virtualized resource,
sure, then
fog doesn't have this limitation of where the boundary is. And the reason why we don't want to use the word edge is because there is no edge. There is no boundary to where this starts and ends. It actually is very pervasive and immersive in what we're trying to do from an architecture perspective. And I think you'll start to see part of that platform then drive this concept of I need to go find a piece of resource out in the IoT world, and that resource you may not even need to know where it is or how it's attached physically. It's a virtual resource.
Yeah, no, I'm starting to hear your SDN and your NFV background, coming into this. But what you're really talking about is distributed computing, and I think what you're educating me here in is that your definition, at least OpenFog's definition of fog, distributes that computing, and we talked about it in the opener, whether that's storage, whether that is actual computing, whether that's networking, control, different types of resources. But you're saying it's extending across the whole network fabric, and that's Lynn. Is that kind of the vision then?
Yeah, we absolutely see the fog. I mean, so let's be honest, there's still some foggy-ish notions about what is fog and what is.
All right, I was going to say it that way, but I left it open for you. Okay, but it's a little bit foggy for me over here, everybody. But okay,
but when you think about it too, I mean, it's not as clear cut as there's the cloud and there's the device, and the two will never meet. I mean, really, we are looking at the continuum between the two things. I mean, if you think of something like if you're wearing a wearable, to the wearable, your mobile device is the cloud, right? Whereas we normally think of a mobile device as being the device, and so forth. So there is sort of this murky area and so forth. But absolutely, we see it as the horizontal, utilizing multiple types of connectivity network types of things. It really is this horizontal architecture that we see.
Okay. Well, I definitely buy into the concept of distributed computing, putting that computing, depending on the use case, wherever it makes most sense from a cost point of view. And I think that, I guess what just threw me a little bit is generally, I think when people think about fog, they think about it, separate from cloud, whether you're visualizing it, the fog's a little lower. And I've actually heard Mist that's actually computing right on the device, or what else? Swarm Mist, I think I've heard most recently, that's right on the edge device itself. But okay. No, I mean, I think the distributed computing makes a lot of sense. I think what I would push back a little bit on is, and Jeff, I guess that would be toward you, is just, it can't be that complicated, because these OT networks, IT networks are really not that sophisticated. At least, well, maybe they'll just evolve. But let's move on. I'd like to have someone just describe, what is the OpenFog Consortium? What's the definition of it? What is it all about?
I can take a stab at that. So we created this consortium as a organization. It's a non-profit or not-for-profit organization with membership fees, and this organization is to define this architecture. It's to define the use cases that would be delivered on this architecture, and then become the voice in the industry of how to apply that architecture in terms of business models, but also in terms of technologies. So we have a blend between academic and industry leaders, and also public type of organizations, government agencies will be joining and are joining that haven't been announced yet, where we want to tackle some of the IoT problems like smart cities or critical infrastructure or manufacturing. So we will have a focus on applying this technology to those industries and those verticals, and also in terms of delivering research papers and trying to tackle some of the technology problems to make this actually happen. So I think that's the blend of what we're trying to do in the organization. And I think what's different about OpenFog versus some of the other organizations out there is we do have an intention, and we will go deliver what we call operational models. And these operational models is a test bed for business validation. And that business validation to figure out, what monies are in that end-to-end type of architecture. Where's the choke points? Where's the money available? How do you figure out what type of ecosystem needs to be put in place for that transformation to actually happen? So we're going to tackle some of that business modeling within the organization also.
Now, are there any specific industry focuses? Is it just dependent on the members, or is it pretty much cover all of, I guess, consumer, commercial, industrial, and infrastructure IoT?
So certainly IoT is our starting point, and the enterprise focus. We're going to start with enterprise type of applications and use cases for IoT, but very quickly that blends into the industrial space, and we will do some industrial aspects. But I also wanted to mention that we're also getting interest in things like robots and autonomous vehicles and autonomous functions and artificial intelligence and machine learning and verticals that are just popping up on the industry right now. Will have some focus areas in FOG because those concepts and those architectures really blend very well together.
Okay. Heather, Lynn, anything to add to that?
I think Jeff covered it very well. Actually, one of the things I would add, if your listeners, is actually as part of one of our first deliverables, we just published a white paper that's available on our website, and I think that can help folks who are listening probably get a broader perspective from an architectural view of what we're trying to achieve.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll put that in the show analysis notes. What about how I mean, I just want to talk about the business model of the OpenFog Consortium now. How does it make money and where is it spent?
So again, it's a non-profit organization. So when you say make money,
how does it generate money?
So
where does it spend that money?
We have a membership fee to join OpenFog, but yet it is an open organization, meaning for the most part, what we create and publish will be open to the community. We are not generating, let's say, confidential or private specs. Most of what we're doing will be open information. But if you want to be part of that creation of that architecture and those test beds, 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 proof of concepts, and open platforms. So you'll see some more unique things coming out of OpenFog around what we call a totally open source, open data type of platforms that will be funded by the membership fees. That's going to be a little bit unique in the industry.
Okay. And I mean, it kind of brings me to the next question in terms of intellectual property. Are you developing any specific technology or intellectual property? Because I'm just wondering about the members versus non-members.
No, I mean, we have an IPR policy that states that if there's anything that you're bringing into the conversation that you consider proprietary, that you don't bring it in, and that any conversation or any creation that we have in the organization is considered non-proprietary.
Okay, and does that mean that non-members access the technology or the intellectual property without fee as well?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about why a company should join the consortium rather than, let's say, some of the other consortiums or alliances or groups. Who wants to take a stab at that?
I will. Okay. So, look, we know there's a lot of organizations out there, especially if you look at, as Jeff was saying and Heller was saying, IoT as one of the spaces that we encompass. In IoT alone, there's, 50 some odd organizations. It's a $6 trillion market. There's 3 billion additional connected devices that are going to be coming online every year for the next, bunch of years. It's huge. It's growing. But again, we're space, we are maniacally focused on this concept called fog computing. So that architecture, so that continuum between, really where the data is being generated and the cloud, that's where we fill in. And so what we like to think of, how we are differentiated, we are the only organization that is really focused on this space. Other organizations are taking pieces of this. And so if you think about some of the other organizations, they might be taking vertical slices of it. But, we're not just about mobile. communications and mobile connections. We're more than just, focused on an industry like energy or industrial or something. And we're not just software focused. We really look at the distributed computing, the storage, the networking services across that cloud to thing continuum. And so we do think that we have this space, and the people and the companies that, think of FOG as that missing link and how to, really solve these problems that are coming as a result of this, connected world that's getting bigger and bigger. Those are those companies that are joining us, those companies that have something to add to this and want to help us solve these problems, or that will benefit from the solving of that. So that's why we think, and that's what we are hearing from the companies that are joining us, is this is the space, this is the model that their businesses need and are welcoming, and they want to have that, they want to share it in their voice. We are early, we're early into this. This is not just, we're not mature. This is not a mature technology. This is emerging, and we are establishing what those, what that architecture is, what those standards will need to be, and so forth. And so the time and the place to help solve that is within the walls of this OpenFog Consortium.
Now, how long has the OpenFog Consortium been open for business or open for activity?
So it launched in November. It was, it was in November of last year, 2015. And we held our first members meeting in Chandler, Arizona, in February, and we had 25 companies there represented. And again, we are growing. We have members in all theaters, around the world. And again, it's a global conversation. Yesterday I was talking to one company that does their focus is on marine technologies. And, ironically, fog is not normally a word that they really like to, use.
That's right.
But that's exactly that is the technology that is necessary for their business model to succeed. So again, it really is this diverse ecosystem that's all coming together, to help solve these problems, to identify other companies that they may want to work with in helping to solve and expand in this area.
Well, you've mentioned, or you guys have mentioned the larger companies that started it up, but can you give us an idea of what's the breakdown right now? How many smaller companies, medium-sized companies? Can you give any other examples? Because I'm curious. Our listeners are going to be listening to this, and they're going to be saying, "Should I join?" And what I'm hearing is that it's a little bigger than the traditional definition of cloud, and I'm hearing that it's a little bit more than just IoT. So maybe another way to look at this, or maybe another angle to kind of view this to illuminate things, is what other types of companies are involved in the open cloud.
Before we get into that, can I take another attempt at what are we trying to do versus the other organizations?
Okay.
As a definition, when you look at, for example, Industrial Internet Consortium, that conversation was around the convergence of IT and OT. It was clearly the purpose of that organization was to converge that conversation and say, let's take the technologies of both of those areas and blend those together into what we consider an effective end-to-end architecture or an end-to-end value proposition. Fog is the next generation. It's the next horizon onto. Once that happens, then you need to take the next step in technology innovation and also in business innovation and move it beyond that convergence to now services and monetization of that. So a couple key attributes of what we're trying to do in OpenFog is to define what that next horizon looks like and where is the business and architectures need to go to meet that next horizon of that converged OT and IT environment.
But Jeff, what exactly does that mean? I mean, I almost thought that Fog would be dealing with this IT and OT, but the way you're talking about it sounds like you're almost abstracting it. Is that the case, that you're abstracting that, I guess, that seam and going into this full distributed computing storage services model?
Yeah, it's considered, it abstract maybe is the wrong word, but it's considered there already, that we already assume that convergence has happened, and now we need to go do something with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And this has come up a couple times, and so before we get back to the companies involved, you have mentioned monetization a couple of times. What does that mean? Dig into the monetization part of it. You're saying there's requirements for monetization. You're saying you're helping define the types of monetization models or business models. Explain that a little bit more to me.
We're trying to open the door with a set of technologies and a platform architecture. The likelihood or the purpose here is to build new types of monetization or services or even data monetization avenues for existing types of businesses, but new types of businesses. So just like cloud services opened up a whole new business model, a whole new way of going about business, we think Fog is going to open up a whole new way of all players in the world in terms of a different type of business approach. And that's what we mean by it.
Okay. Helder, can you add to that? I mean, in particular, Jeff mentioned, the cloud business model that it ushered in was product as a service, or I guess computing as a service. Can you add anything to Jeff's definition there on the monetization side of things?
Yeah, I think Jeff covered it well, and of course we're in the early stages of defining this, so we're actually working on defining a work group that will work exclusively on monetization approaches. So perhaps a bit foggy yet as to how all of this shakes up, but I think Jeff covered it well. And Fog as a service obviously is a concept that is very much in play. If you look at, again, a city architecture, so think of a fog platform as the architecture in a city where the city can then virtualize and lease space on that infrastructure, on that infrastructure for people to run other services. And so that's one way that they can look at creative ways to monetize the investment in such a platform. But again, it's very early, for us having launched it in November.
Sure.
Our first goal was to get this white paper out and explain to people what we're trying to achieve, and put a reference architecture out there that makes sense for people. And certainly to your earlier question, Lynn can certainly give you an update on the companies, but we have a pretty interesting balance between large companies, small companies, and academia. I can tell you, companies like Nebbiolo, which is a very small startup here that was actually founded by an ex-Cisco fellow, Flavio Bonomi, actually one of the people who initially coined the term fog computing, is one of the members that's already on board. And Lynn, please do let Bruce know where we are in terms of membership. But one thing I also wanted to add to the earlier discussion, Bruce, is the fact that our approach is also interesting in the sense that we are, so if you look at Jeff from Intel, myself from Cisco, and others, we are also represented in these other bodies. And one of the things we're trying to do is bring everybody together by forming affiliations between OpenFog and existing standards bodies. For instance, we're working on doing something with IEEE, Barcelona Supercomputer Center, and certainly affiliations as well with the other consortiums that are out there, so that in essence we don't reinvent the wheel. We actually work together in terms of moving a lot of these concepts along.
Okay, and affiliations would mean, what does that mean? Does it mean that a company joining OpenFog wouldn't necessarily need to join the others, or does it mean it sort of bolsters that, or maybe get into what is that affiliation? And I understand it's early, and I understand that you've only been 4 months into it. But again, we're looking at this, or we're trying to talk about this from the perspective of the listeners and their interest in joining, right? So explain maybe the affiliation a little bit more, and then I'm going to ask about standardization, because I didn't get the sense initially that you were doing any standardization work, but that'll be my second question after this.
Yeah, so look at affiliations, and Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So look at affiliations more as strategic relationships between OpenFog and other consortia and other standards organizations, not necessarily with companies. So companies, we're looking to have them join as members, and we have different. We have a tiered membership approach. So obviously, contributing members, large companies who, in essence, want a seat on the board and want to drive and contribute to the strategy of OpenFog, come in at one level, and then we have the next level. So that level is $100,000 a year. Then this level is $25,000, and then we actually created a membership level for small companies at $10,000 to make it very attractive for startups and very small companies. And then we have a $5,000 level for academia and for individual contributors. So again, with the thought being, we want this to grow, we want this to be diverse, and we want this to be, inclusive of different perspectives, because we think that's how innovation truly moves along.
And with respect to standardization, who wants to answer this one? Are you working on any standards? I mean, some consortium, like let's say the All Seen Alliance, they're kind of working on a particular standard. However, the IIC is working not on a standard, but maybe trying to define a de facto standard and working with the standard bodies. Does OpenFog fall into one of those two camps, or is it kind of a third? Is it kind of a third point of view?
Yeah, so we want to leverage existing standards. We actually made a conscious decision to leverage existing standards, and this goes to the heart of these affiliations. So these agreements, these affiliations with existing standards bodies and other consortia, so that we can actually leverage a lot of the great work that's already in flight. So from that perspective, I mean, certainly we'll be developing architectural, intellectual property. We'll be developing interoperability standards in terms of how all of these companies should play together in this environment. But certainly, if there are, let's assume during some of this work, there is a need for a new standard, I think our approach would be to work with the existing standards bodies and try to influence, and through our affiliation with them, steer them to see the need to perhaps drive those standards themselves rather than us reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good approach. I mean, I think if you talk to the standards bodies themselves, they're looking for real-world examples. They're looking for industry to help guide them, because sometimes they're just sitting in a room. Often, obviously, they come from universities and so forth. So I think it's a good symbiotic relationship. Lynn, let's get back to the membership, and what's the breakdown right now? I think you said there's around 25, maybe a little bit more now. But what would be your breakdown in terms of the way that Helder broke it down from large, medium, and small and academic?
Yeah, so right now we actually are almost evenly split. So we actually have a number of academics. This is this is an area where they are doing slices of research, in different areas, and so this. They've been attracted to it without any reach out from us. They keep approaching us. So academics are about a third of our membership, and then large companies and small companies are about equally split as well. So right now we actually have a very nice breakdown. We do, as Jeff said, we do intend to add some government members and other members as well eventually. But right now, it's if you look at the pie, it's about a 33, 34 split across the board. So again, nice. It's a nice mix of different viewpoints and so forth. And by the way, I just wanted to add on to something that Helder just said in terms of when we think about our affiliations, we actually have a tiered affiliation agreement as well. We have technical liaisons, we've got collaboration agreements, and then at the top of the pyramid would be those affiliation agreements. And we do expect, and we see a lot of, our members are very active participants in other organizations, other consortia, other standards organizations, and so forth. And by joining one doesn't mean that you don't have to join anything else. It's,
right.
The affiliation is with the other organization and a slice of that work that affiliation does. It's not it's not 100% overlap. It's taking a piece and taking us teaming together on certain aspects of it.
How are the other associations, consortia, alliances? How are they, I guess, reacting to the creation of OpenFog?
So from what, and Jeff, you can answer some of this as well, but from where I've seen in the conversations that I've been partial to, they have embraced it. There are some very large standards organizations that I don't want to name quite yet, but we'll be announcing some direct action with them. They've embraced this. They feel that this is a future, that again, from the conversations we've had, they think this is going to be as big as cloud, has been. This is something new, and they definitely welcome the opportunity to partner with us. That we're focused on it, and they'd like to work with us to help bring this and make it viable. It is viable now, but just to help grow it and put those standards in place. So we've actually had a fairly warm reception from the organizations that we've talked to.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, the same thing on your side?
Yeah, and I think it's important to highlight that we purposely named this organization Open, and that it's the first word. And part of that acceptance by other organizations is taking this very open approach and making sure we don't reinvent the wheel. So part of our affiliation strategy is to go work with these other consortia and standards organizations in a different relationship than typical technical liaisons. So technical liaisons are a classic way of sharing information or activities or aligning on taxonomies and so on and so forth. But once that information shared, those organizations go off and kind of do their own thing. What we're trying to be is more open about the interactions with these organizations and actually do some partnering in many different aspects beyond, obviously the technical piece of this, but also in terms of how we want to message and bring some harmonization into this industry. And I think we will start to create, especially as the conversations I've been having with other organizations, bring this banner of harmonization and the fact that fog is so horizontal. It's really not stepping on anybody else's toes. It's actually a necessary function to bring this harmonization in the industry. And that's what I'm hearing back when we go and propose an affiliation with these other organizations. And you'll see different levels, like Lynn mentioned. You'll see collaborators, but also you'll see some strategic partners where we will do a number of activities, including industry events with large standards organizations and consortia organizations.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes sense. I mean, with the exception of IPSO, most of the other organizations are vertical in nature, even if they're not defined that way, just by the members that are in there and the work that they're doing. They're focused on the smart home or they're focused in industrial, whereas what you're saying here is it's horizontal. I mean, there is a cloud component to wearables, on the personal side. There's a cloud component to the home. There's a cloud component to commercial, whether it's telematics, industrial, and you've mentioned smart cities. And so I can see that. I mean, I can see the horizontal aspect, and you're not stepping on anyone's toes, and you are stepping on everybody's toes in a way, but not in a bad way. And I think I'm just trying to kind of pull this apart and just trying to understand how the horizontal can work with the vertical. And I think I can see some advantages. I think my last question, I'm going to pose it. I'll pose it to you, Lynn, and then I'll pose it to you, Jeff, is, all right, so I'm a manager within an organization. Our business does touch fog, and I'm going to my boss, and I'm asking for either the 100, the 25, the 10, or the 5K to join the OpenFog Consortium. what is his answer when she says to him, "Why should we spend this money and join?" Lynn?
Well, so it depends on the organization, of course. But for some companies, I think it's important. If they can be part of this initial, we call them FOG pioneers, right? The companies that are so early into this. But again, if you step back for the evolution of technology, like where was Ethernet? Way back when, who were those initial companies that jumped in and helped to create those helped to create it, make it what it is? We do think that we're creating something new. So it's an opportunity, from a market positioning statement, our members are really positioning themselves, and they're the early leaders in this area. Again, if you are looking to help to grow that market for your solutions, this is the way to do that, because you can come in, you can jump in, you can influence that, you can work on some of the architectures, you can work on the security elements of fog nodes. Again, what's important to your business. So there's an opportunity to come in and really make a mark. Again, we are, we're getting started on this journey. This is a long-term journey. This is not a quick flash in the pan and we're going to close up shop and be done and solve everything, by December 31st. But we really are in it early, and now is the time when that person who's asking that question, when their company can really come in and make a difference and help to really set the direction and influence the direction of this work to come.
Okay, so what you're saying is, I think we should join because OpenFog is something that's important to our company. We want to be known as pioneers, and we want to influence what's happening and how it unfolds. Yeah. Jeff, would you add to that? What would be your answer if you're asked that question by your manager, saying, "Why should we be spending this money? We're already a member of a consortium already. Why should we be spending this money?"
I relate it to a famous song, and the song, there's a phrase.
Oh boy!
There's a phrase in the song that says, "There is a fog on the horizon." And
is that what is that? Clarence?
No, it's Art Garfunkel.
Oh, okay.
And what we're seeing, and we see as industry leaders, we see that there is something coming, and that this idea around creating new types of businesses and creating new types of architectures is necessary to take the next step of IoT. And, when you talk to folks who join, for example, IIC, most of the answers we got back from the members that joined IIC was, we wanted to go find out and join a particular ecosystem, or what are the leaders doing and what are the ecosystems that these leaders are building? And that was a very vertical answer, meaning,
right.
I want to go see what GE's vertical system's doing. Fog is going to be about, now, how do these vertical systems interact and play together in a way that's going to create a new layer of services and businesses? And if you want to find out how your company is going to be able to play in that new business environment, then I think you need to join OpenFog, not only from a technology perspective, but also, how do these ecosystems play out? How do the new types of opportunities play out? And I think this is going to be the early voice in the industry of where that opportunity is going to happen in many different verticals, not just IoT, but autonomous types of vehicles, artificial intelligence, the things that I've been talking about earlier on the call. There is going to be new opportunities, both in technology that you provide, but also in how to create your business that you're in into this new environment, to plug and play in this new environment.
Okay, and you're going back to the monetization. So to add to Lynn's answer, what you're saying to your boss is, and we know the fog is coming, and we need to understand how to make money from it. And so we want to be part of this group to basically develop that understanding and to develop how we're going to monetize this new type of distributed computing that's coming. Yeah?
Yes, exactly.
And the other thing too, Bruce, is which just I wanted to add too is that ecosystem that's referring to too, because it's not just so yes, you're coming in to help solve those problems, but once you're in there, you're kind of looking around like who's doing what, and there's an opportunity to really collaborate. So through some of the initiatives that we have directly, or to again through facilitating that we do at our members meetings, there's a lot of networking that goes on, and networking in the sense of person to person, not the computer stuff. There really is a lot of direct interaction and strong interaction, and the ability to have those conversations to see where there's personal opportunity to grow, to specifically grow through some new potential affiliations, member company to member company type of partnership work as well.
Yeah, no, so networking is I would be saying that as well to my manager. Networking is also really important, and I've seen it firsthand in a number of the consortia that I've worked with. It's just these connections when you're face-to-face. This is great, or online, but it's the face-to-face connections that really get business going. All right, excellent. So we will put the link to the white paper that was mentioned. Where should people go though to find out more about the OpenFog Consortium?
So that's our website, which is www.openfogconsortium.org.
Excellent. Was OpenFog available, just out of curiosity, or did you not even bother looking?
It was not available. Anyone who's going to listen to this is going to go look, but no, that was
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. I enjoyed it, and thank you for clearing a little bit of the fog. I just had to say my own cheesy axiom there, but thanks for clearing some of the fog on this.
Great talking with you, Bruce. Thanks so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. And we want to be the lighthouses of this new fog environment. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, that was episode 50, the Big 50. For an analysis of this topic, links to things that we mentioned in the show, and other resources, go to the show analysis notes. They can all be found at iotinc.com/podcast. Now remember, there's a hyphen between the IoT and the Inc. If you've been enjoying this show, I could use your help. It's always great to get references, and the best way is to go to iTunes, where you can leave a 5-star review. It takes you literally only a couple seconds, or a written review. Now remember, you actually have to go into the iTunes app to do that. I read every one of them, and I'd really appreciate it. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Until next time, may your path to IoT business be a clear one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.